Hello, everybody. I got a question this week about a problem we were going over in class, very similar to the one we're dealing with here. And I wanted to go over it and sort of discuss the process and help you guys figure out how to handle this sort of problem. So in order to solve this, we're going to have to make use of a couple of rules. The first one being the quotient rule, and the second being the product rule. You can see the quotient rule is our first rule, the product rule is the second. And finally, you can see below all of those our example, which says, it's a bit of an ugly K, let me rewrite that, which says k of x equals the cube root of x minus 7x e to the x all over x squared. So to solve this, we're going to want to first take a look at which of these rules we're going to want to use. Now, since we're dealing with a fraction here, we're probably going to want to use the quotient rule because we're obviously looking to find k prime of x. I guess I should have written that out beforehand, but you know now. And when you're working with either the quotient rule or the product rule, you want to first assign what's your f of x and what's your g of x. So for this case, we need to find our f of x, our f prime of x, our g of x, and our g prime of x. So to start with, we're just going to identify each. Our f of x is just whatever's in the numerator, and our g of x is just whatever is in the denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and write that out here. So I'll write that out in this top corner. Our f of x is just the cubed root of x minus 7x e to the x. And our g of x is just what we have in our denominator, which is x squared. Now from here, we need to find our f prime of x and our g prime of x. So finding our f prime of x is actually not that trivial. It's not that simple. So I'm going to go ahead and do that down here. So our f prime of x, how do we find that? Well, to start, I'm going to want to rewrite our f of x into something that's a little more easy to work with. We're going to change that cube root into x to the 1/3. And everything else can stay the same. Because remember, the cube root of something is the same as raising it to the power of 1/3. So just like the square root of x equals x to the 1/2, the cube root of x equals x to the 1/3. I'm sure most of you guys know that, but I just want to remind you just in case. So now we have that, our f of x rewritten. We're going to want to convert that into f prime of x. I apologize for my handwriting in advance if it's difficult to read. So we can do this by parts. This part, our first part, is fairly simple to differentiate. We just subtract, we take this 1/3, bring it out front, and then we subtract 1 from up there. That's what we're going to go ahead and do. So we take the 1/3, we bring it out front. So we have 1/3 x, and then we subtract 1 from 1/3. So 1/3 minus 1 is negative 2/3. So just like that, we have that first term taken care of. Actually, let me put that in my calculator, make sure that's right. I don't want to, yeah, okay. Just double checking, doesn't hurt to double check. And next, we have to deal with this. Now, this is where we wind up having to use the product rule. So I'm going to go ahead and put this negative out front just for later use. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to have to define our u of x and our v of x. So this is the second part inside of doing the quotient rule. It's kind of tricky. So let me go ahead and write our u of x down here and our v of x. And these can be whatever. You can call this f of x and g of x. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever you prefer. So our u of x, according to what we have written up here, it's just our first term. And in this case, our first term, let's go ahead and just call that 7x. And our second term will be e to the x. E to the x. All right, let me erase some of this, make it a little less ugly. It's an uphill battle, I know. From here, we need to find u prime of x. U prime of x. And this one's pretty simple. It just winds up being 7. Because again, we take, remember there's a 1 up here. We take the 1, we bring it out front. and we subtract 1, leaving us with 0. And all we have left is the 7. And for our v prime of x, one of our rules for differentiation is that e to the x just stays the same. It's a weird thing about that little function. It's pretty interesting, but that is just how it is. And now we have all of the required parts to fulfill our product rule. So now we're just going to take this little equation and we're going to plug it in down here. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do u prime of x, which is 7, times v of x, which is e to the x, plus u of x, which is 7x, times v prime of x, which is e to the x. And just like that, we have our f prime of x. Took a few steps. It's a little involved, but there you go. I suppose that's what makes this a tricky problem. So now that we have our f prime of x, we can find our g prime of x, which is really simple. We just take the 2, bring it up front, and subtract 1. So the 2 goes up front. X to the 2 minus 1 is just 1, so 2x. Not quite as difficult as finding the f prime of x, definitely, but still something you need to know how to do. All right, so from here, we need to go ahead and plug all of what we found into this equation. Pretty substantial. It's gonna, it might be a little ugly. So let's go ahead and write down our k prime of x right here equals f prime of x times g of x. So here we go. F prime of x is 1/3 x to the negative 2/3. And again, I'm just getting this from here. Minus 7 e to the x minus 7x e to the x. And here I'm just distributing this negative to both terms in here, just so you guys don't get confused. Just wanted to do that all in one step, so it's a little more simple. So there's our f prime of x. Now we're going to multiply that by g of x, which is x squared. We have that from up here. And now we need to subtract f of x times g of x. Our f of x is just the cubed root of x minus 7x e to the x, and parentheses around that, times g prime of x, which is 2x. All right. So we take all of that, and all of that goes over. That is crooked, huh? Yeah, well, better at math than drawing, I guess. And we take all of that and we put it over g of x squared. So that's just x squared, which is just x to the 4th. So I'm going to just go ahead and write that as x to the 4th. Now, if you want, that is an answer. I believe that it would be a correct answer, but we're going to probably want to simplify it just for, just to do it, I guess. It's a little better. You'll never get less points for simplifying something, I guess is a reasonable point. So let's, oh, dang it. Oh. All right, first try. So let's just get this a little bit out of the way so we can simplify it a bit. So k prime of x equals, all right, times, excuse me, time to distribute everything. So we're going to have to multiply this x squared out into all of this. So 1/3 x to the minus 2/3. That just becomes 1/3 x to the, so that's plus. Hi, I apologize for that little interruption, but back to it. So we wind up, where was I? All right, so we wind up with 1/3 x to the 4/3, because we're multiplying this x squared into everything, minus 7x squared e to the x, minus 7x to the 3rd e to the x, minus cube root of x, which I'm just going to write as x to the 1/3, just for consistency's sake, plus 7x e to the x. Oh, oops, forgot to distribute the 2x first. Let me do that instead. So minus, so 2x, x to the 1/3. That would be 1/3 plus 1, which is just 4/3. 4/3 minus 14x squared e to the x. And then now we can just distribute that negative. And if I'm losing you on the algebra, don't worry about it. The above answer is still correct, hopefully, unless I messed it up at some point, which I very well may have. All over x to the 4th. Now, before I go ahead and start trying to simplify this or combine like terms any further, I think you could probably get the point. We could combine this term and this term and this term and this term, but I think this is probably as simplified as we need to get it. The rest is just algebra. So yeah, I hope the process of using the quotient rule and the product rule was clear. Please let me know if you guys have any additional questions. And yeah, thanks for asking for help.